Inshallah, we'll go ahead and start for today. I have 12 minutes after 10, so we'll go ahead and start. We're continuing today with the belief in the last day, al-Imaan bil-Yawm al-Akhir, from the book Sharh Usool il-Imaan by Shaykh Muhammad bin Saalih Al-Uthaymeen, rahimahullah. So we'll go ahead and continue. Bismillah, inna alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruh, wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyati a'malina. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وسلم. وبعد. So the Shaykh says, so the next, you can go to the next slide, inshallah. So this is what we're going to start today. This was the next topic from what we finished last time. And we'll do I have some review questions in here from our last discussion a couple of weeks ago. So we will review some of that, but we'll pick up from exactly from where the next topic was, where the Shaykh was about to begin in the book. So he says, وَالْإِيمَانُ بِالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَلِلْإِيمَانِ بِالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ ثَمَرَاتٌ جَلِيلَةٌ. So al-Iman bil-Yawm al-Akhir, the belief in the last day, it has certain thamarat, fruits, benefits, we'll say, noble benefits. Minha, from amongst them there are, firstly, he says, al-Ula, al-Raghbah في فعل الطاعة والحرص عليها رجاء للثواب ذلك اليوم. So he says, the first benefit of believing in the last day. What is the benefit of believing that there will be a day of judgment? Believing that there will be a last day, a day of recompense, that we will be returning to our Creator, and that we will be judged based upon what we did in this life and the next life. Of the first benefits that we get from that is, he says, awakening the desire to perform acts of obedience to Allah, meaning to Allah, and encouraging one to strive to accomplish them, meaning these acts of obedience, in hopes of gaining the reward of the last day. So basically, it's that if you believe that you will be judged for what you do, and you believe that you will be rewarded for doing good deeds, there will be a time that will come when everything will come to an end in this life, and that you will have to be brought to account before your Lord, and that you will be rewarded for doing acts of obedience to Allah, then this encourages the person to do good deeds in this life. It increases the desire of the person to want to strive to do good things in this life in hopes of gaining the reward on that day. Okay. The second thing, الثانية الرهبة من فعل المعصية والرضا بها خوفا من عقاب ذلك اليوم. So the second thing he says is that benefit of believing in the last day, the day of judgment, is that it arouses the fear of committing acts of disobedience to Allah, and also being pleased with such acts, meaning it makes a person be afraid and fear being even pleased with committing acts of disobedience, due to fearing the punishment of that last day. So in other words, it's also a deterrent. If a person believes that there is a day of judgment, wherein on that day the person will be punished, will be sentenced, if you will, and punished for doing evil things and bad deeds, and their bad deeds will be weighed against them on that day, whereas the outcome could be that they may end up going to the hellfire and being punished. If someone has that type of belief, that is going to be a deterrent for them. If they truly believe that day will come, or they will be resurrected, and they will have to stand before their Creator, and they will be held accountable for evil things that they might have committed, then that's going to be a deterrent for the person, so that the person will refrain, even if they can't on their own, just out of their own nature and natural inclination, refrain from doing the evil. They can at least say to themselves, hey, I believe that Allah is going to hold me to account. God is going to judge me for this. God sees what I'm doing, and there is going to be a day where I'm going to be accountable for what I did. If this thing is an evil thing, that something will happen bad. Something bad could happen to me because of it on that day. And so that is a deterrent for the person. It will keep the person help the person to abstain from committing acts of evil or acts of disobedience to Allah. And the third thing, الثالثة, is that تسلية المؤمن عما يفوته من الدنيا بما يرجوه من نعيم الآخرة وثوابها. And so he says, the third thing is comforting the believer regarding matters of this world that he may not attain, he or she, that they may not attain, with that which he hopes for from the delight and reward of the hereafter. So what is this saying? It's saying that it gives you, the believer, some comfort. That, okay, maybe in this life, I did not become the most wealthy person. Maybe I didn't, marry the most handsome man. Maybe I was not able to marry the most beautiful woman. Or maybe I was not, did not have the nicest house. Maybe I lived in a poor neighborhood, in this life. But there's still some hope for them in the hereafter that if I obey Allah, if I do things that please my Creator, if I believe in Allah and I worship Him and I do things that He is pleased with, that it doesn't matter that in this life I may not have reached a high status of this or that. In the hereafter, I will get the ultimate reward, where my Lord will reward me with whatever I desire of the delights of the next life. Okay? And there are many verses in the Quran that talk about this in the Quran, where Allah says, "Lahum ma yasha'una fiha." They will have the people who believe in Allah, who are allowed to go to paradise. Lahum ma yasha'una fiha. They will have whatever they wish of that in the paradise. Allah will give them everything they wish. And Allah says, "Waladayna mazid." And also we have even more, something extra, even more for them. So it's like whatever their hearts desire, the believers, whatever their hearts desire in the paradise, they will be given that and even more than what they could even possibly hope for in this life. So it's a matter of giving the people, it gives us hope to strive for the hereafter. That whatever we get in this life, this is just a worldly life, okay? We may not achieve great things, or maybe we have some lofty aspirations that we may not ever attain, but we don't feel overly sorrow or overly regretful or remorse or extreme sorrow about that, because we know that the real eternal abode, that's what we're striving for. The reality is that what we gain in the hereafter, that's what's most important. Whether I drove a Mercedes in this life or a Toyota, that's not really, Allah's not going to ask me about that on the Day of Judgment. It's not important. It's not important, So it allows the person to return his focus back to what's most important, and it gives us hope in this life that even though, like as he says, the person may miss out on some things in this life, you won't miss out on anything in the hereafter if you believe correctly in Allah and you worship Allah. Okay. So we can go on to the next slide. So the Shaykh says, وَقَدْ أَنْكَرَ الْكَافِرُونَ الْبَعْثَ بَعْدَ الْمَوْتِ زَاعِمِينَ أَنَّ ذَلِكَ غَيْرَ مُمْكِنٍ وَهَذَا زَعْمٌ بَاطِلٌ دَلَّ عَلَى بَطْلَانِهِ الشَّرْعُ وَالْحِسُّ وَالْعَقْلُ. So he says the disbelievers, al-kuffar, they reject the resurrection after death, claiming that it is impossible. And he says such a claim is false, and its falsehood is proven by a shara', which a shara', when you ever hear this word a shara', it means the Islamic legislative text, means the Quran and the Sunnah. The Quran and the authentic hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So when you hear that word a shara', it's talking about the Islamically legislative text, meaning verses of Quran and authentic hadith from the Prophet ﷺ. Also al-hiss, something we call al-hiss, which means what is perceived by one's senses, what we can perceive, with our sensory perception, if you will. And the third thing is al-aql, which is reasoning, rational reasoning, intelligence. Okay, so he's saying the disbelievers who reject the resurrection, al-ba'th, when you hear this word, it means resurrection, meaning that we will be brought back to life in the next. That everyone will die in this life, and the world will come to an end, and then on the day of judgment, Allah will resurrect everyone. Yawm al-Qiyamah. Okay. The day of Ba'ath, the day of resurrection. Everyone will be brought back to life. Okay, so those people who reject belief in a resurrection, that people will be brought back to life on the last day, then this claim is false, and the falsehood of it is proven by these three things: the legislative text of Islam, what can be perceived by the senses, and also rational reasoning. And he's going to explain all of these. Okay, so we can go to the next slide, insha'Allah. So the first is ash-shara', the divinely revealed text. So the Shaykh, he says, أما من الشرع فقد قال الله تعالى زعم الذين كفروا أن لن يبعثوا قل بلى وربي لتبعثن ثم لتنبؤن بما عملتم وذلك على الله يسير. So he says that in reference to the legislative text of Islam, the Shara', we have proofs from the Quran, and he's just mentioning this verse by way of example. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in this verse in Surah Taghabun, verse 7, that those who disbelieve claim that they will never be resurrected. Say to them, speaking to Prophet Muhammad, O Muhammad, of course, by my Lord, I swear by my Lord, you all will certainly be resurrected, and then you will be informed of what you did, meaning in this life, and that is easy for Allah. Allah says that is easy for Him. ذَلِكَ عَلَى اللَّهِ يَسِيرٌ. That's easy for Allah. And so the Shaykh, he says, وَقَدْ اتَّفَقَتْ جَمِيعُ الْكُتُبِ السَّمَاوِيَّةِ عَلَيْهِ. All of the divinely revealed scriptures are unanimously agreed. They are in unanimous agreement about this matter, meaning that there will be a day of resurrection. There will be a day of resurrection. Okay. So he just mentioned this ayah. This is not the only verse of the Quran that mentions the day of resurrection, but he just mentions it by way of example. Here's an example right in the Quran where Allah says, "Alladhina kafaru," those who disbelieve, they reject, or they claim that and la yub'athu, that they will not be resurrected. Now, do all disbelievers believe they will not be resurrected? No, of course not. No, all disbelievers don't. Even Christians believe in resurrection, the day of judgment. I know I used to be a Christian. They teach that. Jews believe in that. That's in the in Judaism. Okay. So there are other religions besides Islam that do affirm belief in the resurrection. Okay. So, but this is not saying all disbelievers necessarily reject resurrection. But to reject resurrection definitely is disbelief. Do you all understand? All believers don't reject resurrection or the day of judgment. But if you do reject resurrection or day of judgment, that's definitely a disbeliever. You understand? Can you see understand how it's categorized? It's don't be confused by it. So every disbeliever does not reject resurrection, but everyone who rejects resurrection is a disbeliever. All right? Okay. All right. So he goes on to say, we can go to the next slide. He moves on to al-hiss. Okay, and al-hiss is what is perceived by the senses. He says, وَأَمَّا الْحِسْ فَقَدْ أَرَى اللَّهُ عِبَادَهُ إِحْيَاءَ الْمَوْتَى فِي هَذِهِ الدُّنْيَا فِي سُورَةِ الْبَقَرَةِ خَمْسَةَ أَمْثِلَةَ عَلَى ذَلِكَ. So he says, indeed Allah showed his servants that the dead being brought back to life in this worldly life, that it can occur. And Allah gave 5 examples of that right in Surah Al-Baqarah, the 2nd chapter of the Quran. Okay. So I just put here, I summarize. I'll read the verses to you all here, but just for the sake of the slides and not putting all, I just didn't want to translate the whole book and put it on the slides. This is the summarization of what he's getting ready, the 5 examples. So you can jot them down if you want, or they're right there for you. But in verses 55 through 56 in Surah Al-Baqarah, there's the story of the people of Musa. Allah mentions the people of Moses and what happened to them. And so the Shaykh brings that. The first, he says, قَوْمُ مُوسَى حِينَ قَالُوا لَهُ لَن نُؤْمِنَ لَكَ حَتَّى نَرَى اللَّهَ جَهْرًا. They said, it's the people of Musa. They said, we will not believe in you until we see Allah clearly with our own eyes. فَأَمَاتُهُمُ اللَّهُ. So Allah, Allah caused them to die. ثُمَّ أَحْيَاهُمْ. And then he brought them back to life. So في ذلك قول الله تعالى مخاطبا بني إسرائيل. So in this, it's mentioned, the exact verse where Allah is speaking directly to the children of Israel. He says, وَإِذْ قُلْتُمْ يَا مُوسَى لَن نُؤْمِنَ لَكَ حَتَّى نَرَى اللَّهَ جَهْرَةً فَأَخَذَتْهُمُ الصَّاعِقَةُ وَأَنْتُمْ تَنْظُرُونَ ثُمَّ بَعَثْنَاكُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَوْتِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. So this is what this is talking about. Allah says, and remember, when you all said, you children of Israel, said to Moses, we will never believe in you until we see Allah clearly. Until we are, in other words, they wanted Moses, show us Allah. If you let us see God, we'll believe in you, what you're saying, man. Okay, they challenged Musa. So Allah says a thunderbolt seized them, like this. Allah destroyed them by sending a thunderbolt upon them. And Allah says, and that happened to you while you all were looking, while you were watching. So Allah killed them. Then Allah says, ثُمَّ بَعَثْنَاكُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَوْتِكُمْ. But then Allah says, but then we brought you all back to life. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. So that you all would be grateful. So the Shaykh Al-Uthaymeen is saying this is an example in the Quran of something that actually happened, and an event that actually occurred, okay, in this life, of Allah killing a group of people and then bringing them back to life in this life. Not on the Day of Judgment, meaning this happened in the past. This is an event that Allah did to the people of Israel, okay, to the Jews, all right. Well, we'll say Bani Israel, all right. So then he says the second example, al-mithal al-thani, that is the man murdered by the children of Israel, okay. And this is in Surah Al-Baqarah, verses 72 through 73. And so the Shaykh, he says this is regarding the story of a man who was murdered. And then the children of Israel, they argued amongst themselves about what happened to him. Meaning so a group of them murdered him, but then they concealed it. They hid the fact that they committed this crime. They murdered this man. And so then the children of Israel, they started arguing and trying to figure out who actually killed him. Because no one would confess, and they were lying, okay, amongst them, okay. So what happened, Allah فَأَمْرَهُمُ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى أَنْ يَذْبَحُوا بَقَرَةً. So Allah commanded them to slaughter a cow. فَيَضْرِبُوهُ بِبَعْضِهَا لِيُخْبِرَهُمْ بِمَنْ قَتَلَهُ. So Allah told them to strike the cow, take a piece of the cow and strike that dead man's body, and he would bring him back to life, and the man would inform them of who actually murdered him. Okay. So the Shaykh says, وَفِي ذَلِكَ يَقُولُ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى, and regarding this Allah says, وَإِذْ قَتَلْتُمْ نَفْسًا فَادَّارَأْتُمْ فِيهَا وَاللَّهُ مُخْرِجٌ مَا كُنْتُمْ تَكْتُمُونَ فَقُلْنَا اضْرِبُوهُ بِبَعْضِهَا كَذَلِكَ يُحْيِي اللَّهُ الْمَوْتَى وَيُرِيكُمْ آيَاتِهِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. So Allah says, and remember when you all murdered a man unjustly, and then you disputed with each other about it. But Allah would bring out that which you all were concealing, you all were hiding about murdering that man. So Allah revealed to them, commanding them, strike that man's body with a piece of that cow that He commanded them to slaughter. Surah Al-Baqarah, right? كَذَلِكَ يُحْيِي اللَّهُ الْمَوْتَى, and this is how Allah brings the dead to life. So Allah brought that man back to life. And Allah says, وَيُرِيكُمْ آيَاتِهِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ, and to show you all His signs, His miracles, so that perhaps you may use your intelligence, use your senses. All right. So this is an event. The Shaykh is explaining. This is an event that happened in this life. It's not something that's going to happen on the Day of Judgment. This is something that happened in this life, where Allah allowed someone to be killed. They died in this life, and Allah brought that person back to life in this life as a historical event that happened amongst Bani Israel, amongst the children of Israel. Okay. Also in Surah Al-Baqarah. So then he says, Al-Mithal al-Thalith, the third example, is the people who came out of their homes fleeing death. So he says in this story, there were some people, خَرَجُوا مِنْ دِيَارِهِمْ فِرَارًا مِنَ الْمَوْتِ. There were people who left out of their homes fleeing death, وَهُمْ أُلُوفٌ, and they were in thousands, فَأَمَاتَهُمُ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى, but Allah killed them. ثُمَّ أَحْيَاهُمْ, then Allah brought them back to life. And so this is also in Surah Al-Baqarah, and the verses that he mentions there, verse 243, where Allah says, أَلَمْ تَرَى إِلَى الَّذِينَ خَرَجُوا مِنْ دِيَارِهِمْ وَهُمْ أُلُوفٌ حذروا الموت فقال لهم الله موتوا ثم أحياهم إن الله لذو فضل على الناس ولكن أكثر الناس لا يشكرون. So he says, do you not see those people who went out of their homes while they were in the thousands, fleeing death, trying to avoid death? But Allah said to them, die, meaning Allah killed them. He caused them to die anyway. ثم أحياهم, then He brought them back to life. And verily Allah, إن الله لذو فضل على الناس, verily Allah is most beneficent to people. He gives most bounties and favor to the people. But most of the people, وَلَكِنْ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَشْكُرُونَ, but most people are not grateful to Allah. And then the fourth example, the man who passed by the dead village. So he says in this example, in this qissa, this story that's in the Quran, this is in Surah Al-Baqarah, all of these in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 259. He said there was a man who passed by, he said, مَرَّ عَلَى قَرْيَةٍ مَيْتَةٍ. He passed by a village that was just abandoned like this, deceased, if you will say like this, abandoned. And so فَاسْتَبْعَدَ أَنْ يُحْيِيهَا اللَّهُ تَعَالَى فَأَمَاتَهُ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى مِيَةَ سَنَةٍ ثُمَّ أَحْيَاهُ. So he says this man, he thought it far-fetched, or something that was not, something that was inconceivable, that this city, this village that he was passing by, that was abandoned, that was deserted, that was, it was dead, basically. He thought to himself, well, this is this place could never be brought back to life. This place is so broken down and dilapidated and abandoned, etc., like this. It will never come back to life. It could never be brought back to life. And so what happened was Allah caused that man to die. And so he laid there dead. Allah killed him there. And he lay there dead for 100 years. And then after that, Allah brought him back to life. And so this is what is mentioned in this verse in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 209. Like Allah says, أَوْ كَالَّذِي مَرَّ عَلَى قَرْيَةٍ وَهِيَ خَاوِيَةٌ عَلَى عُرُوشِهَا قَالَ أَنَّ يُحْيِي هَذِهِ اللَّهُ بَعْدَ مَوْتِهَا فَمَاتَهُ اللَّهُ مِيَّةَ عَامٍ ثُمَّ بَعَثَهُ قَالَ كَمْ لَبِثْتَ قَالَ لَبِثْتُ يَوْمًا أَوْ بَعْدَ يَوْمٍ. So this is actually the verse. Allah says, just like the man who passed by that village, and it was destroyed, broken down to its foundations. And Allah, the man had said to himself, how could Allah bring this place back to being lively, having life again after it has been destroyed like this? So Allah caused him to die, and he laid there dead for 100 years. And then Allah brought him back to life. And then Allah said, how long have you, kam labithta, how long have you tarried like this? He said, labithtu yawman aw ba'da yawm. He thought he was only laying there for a day or part of a day. He didn't realize he had been dead for 100 years. Allah says he said, well, maybe I've been laying here asleep for a day or part of a day. Allah قال بل لبثت 100 عام فانظر إلى طعامك وشرابك لم يتسنى وانظر إلى حمارك ولنجعلك آية للناس وانظر إلى العظام كيف ننشزها ثم نكسوها لحما. So he says, then Allah, he goes on to say, Allah says, he said to the man, no, you were dead here for 100 years. Look at your clothes, look at your food. It has been, what's the word when food, what's the word? I can't remember the word. When food deteriorates, it deteriorates, it's spoiled, it's deteriorated, it's gone, it's, molded and, whatever, dead or not even there anymore, whatever. It's no good anymore, okay? He says, so look at your food and look at your drink. And look at the himarak. He was riding a himar, which is a donkey. He said, look at your donkey. It's dead, bones, just laying there. So this is so that we can make you an ayah, a sign for people. And look at the bones that are there. And look at how we clothe the bones and we bring put flesh upon the bones again and bring them back to life. Meaning he himself, he had died and deteriorated and become a skeleton. And Allah brought him back to life, clothed his bones and put flesh back on him, etc. And so this is as a sign from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he says, and Allah went on to say, the man said after that, I know now that Allah ala kulli shay'in qadir, that Allah has power over all things, that Allah is capable of doing whatever he wants. And the fifth example is the example of Ibrahim and the 4 birds. This is in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 260. What is this talking about? This is the story of Ibrahim al-Khalil. حين سأل الله تعالى أن يريه كيف يحيي الموتى. When Ibrahim asked Allah in the Quran to show him, how do you give life to the dead? Because Ibrahim was informed by Allah that Allah would bring the dead back to life. On the Day of Judgment, Allah will resurrect everyone that existed in this life. Allah will bring them back to life on the Day of Judgment. So Ibrahim wanted to know from Allah, كيف يحيي الله الموتى? How can Allah bring the dead back to life? So Allah commanded him to kill 4 birds and to put them on 4 different mountain tops. This is in the Quran, in this verse. Okay? And then Allah told him then to call them to you. After he killed them and put them on different mountains. Then Allah said, now call to them. And what happened? Those birds, Allah put them back together after he had cut them into pieces and slaughtered them. Allah put them back together and they came back to him, flying back to him. And Allah says, sa'yan, hastefully, in haste. They flew back to him very quickly. Okay? So this is in that verse in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 260. So why is he mentioning all of this? Because these are things that all actually happened. It's not Allah talking about something that's going to happen on the Day of Judgment. But this is showing that Allah has already done this before and shown people in this life that he can do it. All right? Bring back the dead back to life after they're just dust. Allah can bring whatever he made, he can bring it back to life. And Allah has shown this before in this life to people of the past. It has happened, okay? All right, you can go to the next slide. Oh, you already went? Okay, good. Okay. So the Shaykh says, فَهَذِهِ الْأَمْثِلَةِ حِسِّيَّةِ وَاقِعَةِ تَدُلُّ عَلَى إِمْكَانِ إِحْيَاءِ الْمَوْتَى. So he says these are real examples that actually took place and which are evidence of the possibility of raising the dead back to life. And it has been pointed out earlier, meaning in this book, we've already discussed it, that giving life to the dead and resurrecting them from their graves by the will of Allah are some of the miraculous signs that were given to Isa ibn Maryam, the son of Mary. This happened with one of Allah's prophets also, along with what we've already mentioned from Surah Al-Baqarah, just these 5 examples in this one surah, let alone the rest of the Quran, but just these 5 examples, Allah shows that he himself did this in this life. Also, he said we can add to this what Isa ibn Maryam did with bringing the dead back, bringing them back out of dead people by the leave of Allah, permission of Allah, as a sign to the people of a miracle, bringing a dead person back to life and allowing the person being able to speak and so forth. No.
Yeah, but this is for the people, the believers. But how can you prove to people who are disbelievers and they don't believe in this?
We're coming to it. He's coming to it. He's coming to it, inshallah. There's more. He's coming to it. So the next thing we go on to is al-aql, the rational proof. Okay, the rational evidence. Okay, so the Shaykh says, وَأَمَّا دَلَالَةُ الْعَقْلِ فَمِنْ وَجْهَيْنِ. So in reference to the evidence of the intellect, how we can prove intellectually, and exactly what you're talking about, that the day of resurrection is true and that it really exists, that it will happen. and that Allah can bring us back to life. He says the first of them, okay, is that Allah is the one who originated the creation of the heavens and the earth. Being able to originate the process of creation, He is not incapable of repeating it after it has perished. Okay, and so He brings the verse of the Quran where Allah says, وَهُوَ الَّذِي يَبْدَأُ الْخَلْقَ ثُمَّ يُعِيدُهُ وَهُوَ أَهْوَنُ عَلَيْهِ. In Surah Al-Rum, verse 27, Allah says, and He is the one who originated the creation. Then He will repeat it, meaning He will make it happen again after it has perished. And the point is, He says, وَهُوَ أَهْوَنُ عَلَيْهِ. And it is even more easier for Allah to do that. How can one deny the fact that Allah can recreate what He already created in the first place? If I do something one time, if I did it, more than likely I can do it again. Okay, all right? If I can do a root canal on your tooth, I'm pretty sure I can guarantee if you come back to me needing another root canal, I can do it, especially if I did the first one. You already seen I'm able to do it. So why would you challenge my ability to be able to do something, and you already seen that I can do it in the first place? Okay, so this is the first proof against those who reject that Allah can bring His creatures back to life. He made them in the first place. What makes you doubt that He can make us again? Make us again. It's even, and as He says this ayah, huwa ahwanu alayhi. It's even yani ashal. It's even easier for Him to do it. It's not more difficult. Usually, when you do something the second time, it's easier, right? If you did it once, then the second time, the third time, the fourth, it's even more easier. And not that it was ever difficult for Allah, because it wasn't never difficult for Allah to create us. That's not the point. But the point is that, if someone has done something, just on a worldly example, and we don't make comparisons to Allah. Nothing is comparable to Allah. But I'm just saying, just using your aql about this life, your reasoning and analogical deduction about what's going on in this life, if someone does something once, it's very easy for them to do it again, more repetitively again, okay? It's not harder. They did it once, they already know how to do it, that means, all right? So now even more so with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, okay? So then he goes on, he brings another verse, another verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Allah says, كَمَا بَدَأْنَا أَوَّلْ خَلْقٍ نُعِيدُهُ وَعْدًا عَلَيْنَا إِنَّا كُنَّا فَاعِلِينَ. And Allah says, just as we began the first creation, we shall indeed repeat it. A promise we have undertaken, truly we shall do it. Surah Al-Anbiya, verse 104. So, Allah also says, in the next verse He brings, in response to those who denied giving life to rotten and decomposed bones, Allah ordered Prophet Muhammad to say to them, He said, قُلْ يُحْيِيهَا الَّذِي أَنْشَأَهَا أَوَّلَ مَرَّةٍ بَلْ هُوَ بِكُلِّ خَلْقٍ عَلِيمٍ. Say to them, Muhammad, no, do not reject it, but rather the one who gave them life in the first place, indeed He will give them life again. وَهُوَ بِكُلِّ خَلْقٍ عَلِيمٍ. And He is all knowledgeable, He's the all-knower of every creation. Okay, this is in Surah Yasin, verse 79. Okay, so that's the first angle of proof regarding the rational proof that we have against those who reject that Allah can bring back the creation on the day of resurrection, that He did it in the first place. So it only stands to reason, if someone used their intellect, that He can do it again. That's our first angle of proof. So the next slide, and we will, let's see what time it is. Okay, after this, we'll get ready we're going to have some quiz questions, and then we'll take a break and we'll continue. Quiz question. The angel charged with removing the souls from the body at the time of death is properly called what? A. Israfil, B. Jibril, C. Israel, D. the angel of death, or Malik al-Maut, or E. none of those, none of the above. I hear, who says D? Did somebody say E? Any other answers? A, B, C? No? Okay, so we go to the next slide. And the answer is D, the angel of death, Malik al-Maut. And the reason I put that, because we mentioned that there are some narrations that people mention that they say that Israel is the name of the angel of death, but there are no authentic hadiths to support that. Okay, there's nothing authentic from the prophets or him to say that. So don't be confused if you hear that. The only thing we have that's authentic regarding that angel is that he's called Malik al-Maut, the angel of death. Okay.
In Christian faith, do they have a name?
I don't know. Well, I don't remember. Well, I don't remember any name of from when I was a Christian growing up, going to Bible school or anything like that. I don't remember them giving a particular name to the angel of death. From my understanding, if I remember correctly, I think this name came from Israeliyat, but from the Jews, not from the Christians, though. The Jews may know something about that, and that may have came from them, but not from Christianity. I don't know of that, and Allah knows best, but I don't know of that being in Christianity. Other than the cartoons of the Grim Reaper, with the guy with the hood on and the skull face, and he has this long Reaper thing, whatever. But I don't even think that's in the Bible. I think that's just came from some mythology somewhere. So what's next? It's still used. The Grim Reaper cartoon is still used. It's still used, as a sign of or symbol of death or something like this. The next question: the intermediate stage, i.e., the grave state, after death and before the day of judgment, is known as: is it A, Qiyamah, B, Barzakh, C, Dunya, or D, Falafel? Who said D? I thought somebody said D. B is in boy or D is in David? D is in boy. Okay. Anybody say anything other? She says definitely not falafel. As you all see, I like food. Okay, so you can go to the next slide, inshallah. And the answer is barzakh. Barzakh means something that separates between one thing and another thing. It's a partition.
First word means.
Qiyamah, who knows what qiyamah means? Qiyamah, Yawm al-Qiyamah, the day we say that Yawm al-Qiyamah, usually talking about the day of resurrection. Okay. It comes from the word qiyam, which means to stand. On that day, people are going to be brought up out of the graves, and the ba'ath, they'll be brought standing before their Lord. So it's the Yawm al-Qiyamah, the day of standing before your Lord, the day of resurrection. Okay, so you'll hear Yawm al-Qiyamah, it means the day of judgment. Dunya, what does dunya mean? It means this life, the worldly life. Okay, literally means something that's close. Something that's near, something that you can, that's near to you. Okay, and then D. It's a nice, I guess, some type of Middle Eastern or Mediterranean food. Definitely doesn't mean the day of judgment. Okay, so inshallah, I'll go ahead and let you all have a break, and we'll come back we'll pick back up in like 10 minutes, inshallah, because I want to get a little something to eat, and then we'll pick back up in 10 minutes. Any questions though before we stop for the break? No questions? Okay, so we'll pick up from there, inshallah.